Hello, 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 dear all. It's so great to see people joining. So let's wait just there a couple of more minutes, and we'll get started. Yeah, people, right now it's fasting time.
Well,
So we hope that people will join. Anyway, some of the people are going to watch us on Facebook because this is more convenient way for them. Yes, but anyway, happy Ramadan to all. It's so great to have all of you today at Thursday at EWB Thursday webinar series. And today we are double happy to host again Professor Salas, yeah, from the US. And it's our pleasure to welcome you virtually to Tajikistan. And once again, thank you so much, dear all, for joining today's webinar. And for those of you who are not familiar with our speaker today, just let me share some information about him. Spencer Salas, PhD, is a professor at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, whose interdisciplinary scholarship examines U.S. Latinization in New South context. He has been a Fulbright Fellow to Romania, Guatemala, and South Africa, and a frequent U.S. Department of State English language specialist. He writes for a he writes for a broad range of audiences with recent feature manuscripts in the Urban Review, Equity and Excellence in Education, and the Bilingual Research Journal. He is co-editor of Vygotsky in 21st Century Society, U.S. Latinos and Education Policy, Education in the New Latino South, and the TESOL Encyclopedia of the English Language Teaching, first edition. And this is the second time Professor Salas is doing webinar with English Without Borders. And today he's going to talk about reading up close and personal, connection making, and the classic American short story. And again, I am, yes, so honored to welcome you today, Dr. Salas, and I'm giving the floor over to you. And I encourage our audience to stay active and engaged and to ask questions to our speaker after his presentation. And thank you so much, dear all. Over to you, Professor.
well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I'm always happy to collaborate with English Without Borders. I wish you all a good evening and a blessed Ramadan. I hope you say a lot of prayers for me and my family, and God bless all of you. So today we're gonna jump right in, reading up close and personal, connection making, and the classic American short story. Um, so once again, just like Nasiba said, I'm dialing in from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and I'd also like to convey my colleagues' best wishes to all of you. So let's just jump in, and here's an overview of what hold on one second. That's my email, by the way. Okay, so let me just say again, welcome. And here's an outline of what I'd like to accomplish today. Um, like us to think about the benefits and the challenges of reading classic American short stories with adolescent learners in particular. I'd like to explore three types of connections that readers can make with text. And I'd like to apply these three connections, text to self, text to text, and text to world, with a short story entitled Transients in Arcadia. And finally, I'd like us to reflect on how reading up close and personal might motivate students. So, great literature is part of the secondary curriculum and post-secondary curriculum around the world. And reading the classics is part of becoming an educated person. And in the United States, there's an expression, GOAT, greatest of all time. He's the GOAT. She's the GOAT, right? And we read GOATs all the time in secondary school, great authors that we're proud of nationally, right? That represent the best of our national heritage and international authors as well. And that's a big part of what high school is about, what we call high school, secondary school. But as teachers, even if we love reading and we love goats, right? Many teens and young adults struggle with studying classics. And there are a couple reasons, particularly, we can think, why is that so? Well, first of all, as students get older, we shift from teaching reading to teaching literature. So it's less about how to read and more about what they're reading. There's also an issue of relevance. The classics, like O. Henry, might seem too old to be relevant to some of our students. And finally, some of our students, especially in their teenage years, have already been labeled or have labeled themselves as good readers or bad readers. I'm not good at reading. Reading is hard, or I'm really good at reading. So um, that's a big challenge that we encounter when we're working with adolescents. Oops, hold on a second. Well, in any event, we're always looking for new classroom strategies. And I've collaborated extensively with adolescents' engagement with literature with my colleagues in theater education and reading education. Now, I have to say that in the field of TESOL, a lot of us come from a linguistics background or a literature background. So we don't necessarily have the pedagogical tools to engage students in literacy development. Well, even though they've been around for a long time, I hadn't heard of this text to self, text to text, text to world connection making until I began working with elementary school teachers, right? It's something I learned from grade school teachers. And basically, this whole idea of reading up close and personal or connection making is grounded in a reader response framework that understands reading as a creative process that elevates readers as co-authors. So, as opposed to approaching the text with the question, what does the text mean? In a reader response framework, the question changes to, what does the text mean to me? And today, I'd like to talk about three types of connections that we can model and help our students to get used to making as they're working through a classic piece of American literature. The first is a text to self connection. How can I connect this text to my life? Number two, text to text. How can I connect this text to another text I've read? And finally, text to world. How can I connect this text to something happening in the world? So, how do we get started? First of all, select a short text, right? And you want to work with the students to establish a baseline understanding of the story, the background knowledge they might need, the vocabulary, the syntax, and the plot. But as you're doing that, you can engage students in this type of connection making. But also, it's important to remember that the connection making can happen before, during, and after reading. So, for today's workshop, I want to look at a short story by an American author known as commonly known as O. Henry. So he's best known for his short stories, and O. Henry actually is his pseudonym. His real name was William Sidney Porter. And like I said, we read O. Henry in U.S. secondary schools. He's sort of considered one of the fathers of the American short story. And actually, there's an annual prize that's awarded every year in his name to the very best short story that appears in English in American or Canadian periodicals. It's called the O. Henry Prize. So specifically, we're going to take up a story he wrote called Transients in Arcadia. And you can access the PDF version of the story through the American English website. And here's the address, and you can download the PDF and use it in your classrooms. Well, like we talked about, one of the reasons that adolescents might struggle a little bit with classic American short stories is even though they're short, they're sort of refined. So the title Transients in Arcadia already, wow, what does that even mean? So transient is person who's staying or working in a place for only a short time, a passerby. And Arcadia, a mountainous region of ancient Greece, an unspoiled wilderness, a sort of paradise. So transients in Arcadia. And we'll find out as we read the story what that means in the context of the O. Henry narrative. So let's start with text to self connections. So a good way to start this whole reader response approach is for teachers to model the connection making. And one way you might begin in the class is to say, all right, today we're going to read a story by an author named O. Henry. It's called Transients in Arcadia. And we'll learn more about what transients in Arcadia mean. But one of the big messages of the story is that sometime we daydream about what it would be like to be another person or to have another life. So I'd like to share a little bit about daydreaming and me. So when we were little, like a lot of little children, we had a game of pretend, and my neighborhood friends and I would have sword fights with sticks that we'd find in the woods where we lived. But it was all pretend, and that's what made it so fun. So even from a young age, it's something that we do. We imagine what it's like to live in a faraway place and a faraway time as someone else. So that's a connection that I can make with this text that we're going to read. I understand what it is to pretend or to make believe. And I guess I'd ask the question, and then you can ask the question to your students, and I'll ask it to all of you. Um, in your childhood, did you ever play games of pretend? And who did you pretend to be? So we can even stop for a second if someone wants to join in and respond.
I can share.
Sure.
Yeah. In my childhood, yes, we played games where I pretended to be a queen. So it
Mhm.
was kind of this stuff, and like I liked giving orders.
Yeah.
And yeah, and yeah, my friend, they used to play like, like knights, and being like, gentlemen or rich people around me, like, my friends. And it
Yeah.
was like that, but it was funny. Yeah, it was fun.
Yes, and that's part of our childhood, right? Great childhood memory. So another respondent says um, that they played a game of spies. They pretended to be spies, right? Sometimes we pretend to be here. Another respondent said pretending to be a doctor, sometimes a teacher. So I think we have that in common. Wherever we're from as children, we have um, that we enjoy games of make-believe. And in the United States, it's an institution. Really, every Halloween at the end of October, we all dress up and the kids go to door in costume. And it's one of, um, it's a very exciting holiday when you're little, right? So that's a connection we can make already with the story. Um, uh, we know a little bit about what the story is going to be about, and so we can make that connection of pretend, right? Just like the characters in the story are going to pretend to be someone who they're not. We've all experienced that, at least as children. So, Transients in Arcadia. Again, it's a very short story, 5 pages long, and it opens in the lobby of a luxurious New York hotel, the Lotus. It's a hot July in the early 1900s. So, the Lotus, this gorgeous hotel, is a special place for the rich to temporarily escape the intense summer heat and noise of the city. We're introduced to two mysterious guests. Madame Eloise Darcy Beaumont is rumored to be a great lady, and in the hotel dining room, where she takes her meals, she meets Harold Farrington, who's also likewise rumored to be a great man, but really nobody knows much about them. But the two guests are, handsome and beautiful and look like a great couple, and they became friends. And from the point of view of the hotel staff and the fellow guests, they look like a great match, a great couple. But the night before Madame Darcy Beaumont is rumored to be leaving for Europe, she's at dinner with Mr. Farrington, and she reveals she's not who she's been pretending to be. Her real name is Mammy Civiter, and she works in a department store selling women's clothes. So all this time she's been pretending. Well, in something of a twist, the gentleman, Mr. Farrington, shares that his real name is James McManus or Jimmy, and he's not a great gentleman either. Like Mamie, Jimmy's week at the Lotus was something he had saved for too, wanting to experience, even if temporarily, the lifestyle of the rich and famous. And that's how the story ends, with Mamie and Jimmy revealing their true identities to each other, and they agree to meet again as themselves in New York City at Coney Island, which is a working class beach park in Brooklyn, New York, and you can still visit it today. The story ends. Mr. Farrington, she said with a smile that everyone in the Lotus loved, I want to tell you something. I'm going to leave early tomorrow morning because I must go back to work. I work selling women's clothes at Casey's shop. That dollar is all the money I have. I won't have more until I get paid at the end of the week. You're a real gentleman and you've been good to me, and I wanted to tell you before I went. So, to recap, a text to self connection is, how does this text connect to my life? Or on a personal note, what does this story remind me of? How do the characters' experiences mirror, even in small ways, my own? And like I said, the text to self connection can happen before, during, and after reading. So here, the personal connection, the text to self connection that I modeled and that we started to talk about was this idea of, have you ever played make believe, or have you ever pretended to be someone you weren't? And a lot of us have as children, maybe not so much as adults, right? In addition to text to self connection making, there's also something called text to text connection making. And this asks readers to connect the current reading, Transients in Arcadia, with something they've read before. The connection might be at the level of a storyline, a specific character or characters, a theme or themes, a stylistic convention, and so forth. The text we connect transients in Arcadia to might be another short American short story or some other work of fiction or nonfiction that we've read. But sometimes our adolescent readers don't have a lot of experience with American literature. So when we think of text to text, we can think broadly about text being a film, music, poetry, photography, and so forth. So here's an example. Here's a passage from O. Henry, and let's see if we can make some text to text connections. Madame was alone in the Hotel Lotus. So here's Madame Beaumont, right? She rose from bed late in the morning. She was then a sweet, soft person who seemed to shine quietly. But at different dinner, she was different. She would wear a beautiful dress. Always there were red flowers at her shoulder. When the head waiter saw a dress like this, he met it at the door. You thought of Paris when you saw it, and of the theater and of old romances. It was said that she was a woman who had traveled all over the world. It was said that she knew the most important people everywhere. So, thinking about text to text connection, we can connect possibly O. Henry and that passage of O. Henry with music. And I thought of Bad Bunny, right? And Cardi B's song, I Like It Like That, right? I don't know if you're a fan of Bad Bunny, but you might also relate it to Ariana Grande's 2019 hit Seven Rings. You know, I want it, I buy it. Or for those of us who are a little bit older, you might think of Madonna, right? And her song Material Girl. So all of these songs are about materialism, and American society. And that's sort of an image that at least I connect to that passage of the O. Henry text. So, in terms of a text to text classroom activity, you might divide the class into smaller groups and explain that each group is producing the soundtrack to go with the film version of the O. Henry story. So pick a moment of the text and pose the question, what song would you juxtapose with the passage to create additional meaning? Then have small groups of students brainstorm and decide on a song that they see as somehow connected to the storyline or the character, and ask them to copy the specific lyrics of the song that they connect to transients in Arcadia, and ask them to prepare to explain to their peers what's the connection. Once students are ready, have them present to the class and ask for feedback about their short story soundtrack. So here's a question. What song would you play with this passage to create additional meaning? It's the same passage we read before. Madam was alone at the Hotel Lotus. She rose from bed in the late in the morning. She was then a sweet, soft person who seemed to shine quietly. But at dinner, she was different. She would wear a beautiful dress. Always there were red flowers at her shoulder. When the head waiter saw a dress like this, he met it at the door. You thought of Paris when you saw it, and of the theater and of old romances. It was said that she was a woman who had traveled all over the world. It was said she knew the most important people everywhere. So what do you think? What's the song that this reminds you of? If you were going to create a soundtrack to this, what do you think, Nasiba, or anyone really?
I think the soundtrack could be something very uh, romantic, because all this description is about an elite lady who is very delicate, very gentle, and all the soundtrack should be conveying this kind of emotion.
That's right. When I see that word shine, she's seen the shine. I think of that song. Do you know the Rihanna song, "Shine Bright Like a Diamond"? Something. That's what I think about. Or maybe the Lady in Red. That's an older song, right? Lady in Red. But anyhow, you'd ask your students, and maybe Flowers by Miley Cyrus, someone said. So,
Or
we
maybe
can,
Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman, right? So ask your students to make a soundtrack for the text. And that's a fun way to get them connecting. So to reiterate, text-to-text connection asks readers to relate content or interpretations from one text to another. And remember, it can be a movie, a song, text broadly defined. So because the text-to-text connection asks readers to relate one text to another, it's probably best to wait until the class has completed the story at hand before trying to relate it to another. Although, you have to try it out and see where it takes them. The third and final type of connection is a text-to-world connection. And this type of connection making pushes the storyline, theme, characters, and messaging of the text into the present day by asking readers to relate the text to something happening in our world. So again, teachers can model what a text-to-world connection might sound like. For example, one way that I connect to transients in Arcadia is that it's really true in contemporary US society today in 2026. We've never let go of the idea that the more money people have somehow adds to their merit. Um, and they're more important, right? That's something in American culture. Someone who has lots of money is special. So that's a connection. Whether that's true or not, that's certainly a connection we can make.
Yeah. VIP person, VIP people.
VIP, right? Think Jeff Bezos, if lots of money, you must be important. In addition to modeling text-to-world connections, a creative way of getting at text-to-world connection making is something we call writing and role. So what you can do is ask the students to imagine their Mamie Siviter, the beautiful woman who revealed that she was just pretending. And it's the end of her adult life. And before she dies, she decides to write a letter to her children and grandchildren to impart some final words of wisdom to them and words of wisdom to future generations about what she learned about herself and her life during the stay at at the Hotel Lotus and the friendship that she grew with Jimmy McManus. And what would she write to her children? What do you think?
I think she would write like, in my young ages, I really wanted to pretend like a rich lady, but
Mhm.
later on it turned out that being authentic and being myself is such a treasure. So be
Yes,
yourself.
probably, right? And that's text to world. I mean, that's something that we learn in the world, right? Another another variation might be write the letter from Jimmy McManus's perspective. What lessons did he learn? So you could have students either individually compose these very personal messages or divide them into groups and co-create the letters. What sort of wisdom would the characters want to pass down to the future, and have students present their letters to the class and discuss um, the takeaways for the present generation. So, in other words, what are the implications for the O. Henry story for us today? And that's a fun way of getting at that idea.
I think like, even the time passes by, the issues of society remain the same.
Yeah.
Even like everything changes, but through the generations, the burning questions and like, burning dilemmas still remain the same.
Yes, and I think part of it is this: what's happiness? What is happiness? What does it mean to be fulfilled? This is why these stories still are ones that we take up. I think that's exactly right, because they're making us take up these questions that we still have, we've never resolved. Well, in any event, when you are um, connecting to text, we have to keep in mind that not all readers might agree about what the final lesson of the O. Henry story is, right? And some might read Transients as a cautionary tale with a final message that people shouldn't try to be someone or something they're not. And other readers might admire the two characters for saving up their small salaries for a specific goal, like spending the week at the hotel. So again, the connection making process is shaped by the individual reader's point of view. So it's democratic in the sense that, there's possibility for a whole lot of reactions, and these might vary, and that's okay. So to recap, um, the whole idea of reader response theory and reading up close and personal is to move from this question of what does the text mean to what does the text mean to me. And we talked about today three types of connections that we can model and get our students comfortable or give our students permission to make. Text to self, how can I connect this text to my life? Text to text, how can I connect this text to another that I've read? And finally, text the world, how can I connect this text to something happening in the world? So I'll just share some final thoughts about O. Henry. So as I mentioned, O. Henry wasn't his real name. His real name was William Sidney Porter, and he was born in 1862, died in 1910, and actually is a native of North Carolina. He was born not far from Charlotte, where I'm speaking to you now. He moved to Texas, uh, where he started a family and career with the First National Bank of Austin. And he was charged with the federal crime of embezzlement in 1895. He was taking money from the bank. So he fled to Honduras, leaving behind his wife, his young wife, and very young daughter. Well, 6 months later, he received word that his wife had contracted tuberculosis. So he went back to Texas and his wife died. And he went to prison for 3 years, where he began writing these stories, and under the pseudonym of O. Henry. So it's the disguise that we still know him by even today. So O. Henry was a disguise, for William Sidney Porter. And I think we can imagine that the characters that Porter or O. Henry invented and the storylines he composed were his way of making sense of and rewriting his own life and of making peace with the ghosts and regrets that must have haunted him until he died. And maybe that's why Transience in Arcadia is still able to transport us deep within and far beyond our own experiences and into spaces that allow us to move beyond the singularity of the question, what does the text mean, to a more inclusive, what does the text mean to me? And it's in that very intimate dialogue between us, the text, and the world that transients in Arcadia or any other reading becomes ours and of our own time, up close and personal. So to learn more, you can access the O. Henry short story and in fact a larger collection on the American English website. And we also have here an article that was published in Forum magazine. And finally, I'll say that I did a very similar webinar for AE Live back in 2025, and you can access it here. So thank you so much. And that's what I wanted to share with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was amazing. So, yeah, we really dive deeper beyond the text, but rather, trying to understand and trying to feel those personages, yeah, through this story. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Salas. And I believe, like, it's not only just about the pedagogical aspect of teaching, but also psychological aspect of teaching, because like kind of pondering ourselves about the questions that make us think about
Yeah,
why do you leave, why do we leave, and what the purpose of these pretending and like being someone else. So these
yeah.
are very interesting questions. And thank you so much. This is,
Thank you.
yeah, this is a great way how we can turn reading into an exciting,
Yeah.
activity of self-exploration and also exploration beyond the text, and also just, making it connected with the real world. This is really great. Thank you so much. And we have, yeah, a number of questions,
I
several
see
questions.
them. Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
one that
yeah,
there's
go
one
ahead.
question. Let's
Mhm.
just jump right in. Um, is there a risk of overusing text to self connections to the point where students focus more on themselves than on the text? And that's a great question, right? I think that's something that the teacher would have to, the teacher would want to, um, how do you say, monitor that that it doesn't become that reading doesn't just become about me, right? But at the same time, I think I think it can become too much about the reader sometimes. But let me put it this way. We all have different traditions of how we teach literature. In some traditions, it's more of a history of literature,
Mhm.
right? Where does O. Henry fit into a timeline of American literature and what are his contributions and how does his work relate to what came before or what came after? So, in some cases, when we approach literature, some traditions are looking at a history of literature. In the US, I can say, in since the 19 well for a long time, there was something called new criticism that was back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, where it was much more about the personal interpretation, what I took away from the reading as a reader. So I think it's something you want to balance. I I do think that I'll say this that because the other question or comment was, how can we design connection activities that promote acquisition of target vocabulary and grammatical structures, not just discussion? I think connection making is really related to motivation and reading more larger reading comprehension. So you're going to want to do the vocabulary study, the grammatical study, that sort of decoding work with them. Also, in addition to this is something in addition to, I see connection making as a way of motivating students because it's not just the issue of, I don't understand, the text is difficult. But I think a big issue when you're working with teenagers is, why should I care? You know, or why would I even want to read this? So it's by getting them motivated through this text to self, text to text, text to world connection making, that I think we're going to at least um, make that text something that they want to engage in or want to engage with. Those are great questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have another question. Are there any challenges of applying these strategies with adolescents?
I think that in some cases there might be because I don't know to what extent the adolescent is used to having the permission to read at such a personal level. So I think one way we can overcome that is for, again, to have the teacher model the connection making moves and to give students permission to make connections between text and self and the world. I think another challenge might be um, the shyness that some adolescents bring, or, the fear of ridicule from their classmates. So somehow, when a student makes a connection that might not be so apparent for the rest of us, for the teacher to encourage, not to judge the response immediately, but to encourage the student to explain, well, how do you make that connection or help us to understand that sort of connection? I think another challenge would be text to text because they might not have a foundation in literature that they can easily compare one story to the next. So again, that's why we would want to open it up to texts broadly conceived or broadly defined, including music and film and that sort of thing. Oh, this is a great question. How can
Yeah.
we prevent connection activities from remaining at a superficial level and instead push students toward deeper interpretation using the text itself? That's a great question. I guess you can model it, right? You could try modeling it. Um, and I think again, part of what the teacher is going to do is to keep probing. You said you make that connection. Why? Elaborate. Who else makes a similar connection? Why is that? And to keep probing, having them explain, or what, ask them to be specific. What line in the text, where are you making that connection specifically with which line in the text or which word in the text? So I think you can follow up. In other words, you don't necessarily have to accept the connection. You can ask them to explain it, to elaborate. Yes, these are great questions.
Yeah. I have also a question. To what extent these kind of reading techniques can also help, to boost writing skills of students?
Oh, well, that's great. That's a great question. I suppose that the connection making could be oral, right? Just a conversation, a discussion, but it could also be that you have them write a brief, um, write out on paper and compose, articulate the connection that they've made, whether it's text to self, text to text, or text to world, in the form of a free writing, let's say just a brief, unedited 3-minute free write, or maybe a more composed paragraph, right? Or even a longer paper. For sure. These are great questions. I guess here's a question I have for the group. Of the three types of connections, text to self, text to text, text to world, which ones would motivate your students most? So of the
Uh,
three,
on my personal level, like text to me and text to world would be
yeah.
more
So to me, right? And text to world, another respondent said the same, text to self, text to world. Which do you think would be the most challenging? Maybe text to text. That's what some people are saying. It's just, I think, and yeah, because I think people, students might think it's limited to other works of literature. initially. But again, we can model it. Um, and again, I'll say this, that this strategy is something that in the United States, since I don't know, the 90s, people have used in elementary school with young readers, right? Um, so it's something that a lot of readers in the US in the last generation have grown up with. Um, but again, it's something that TESOL professionals aren't necessarily aware of because if we didn't have the coursework in literacy pedagogy, we might not be aware of these strategies. So as a, sort of final takeaway, I'd say, if you want to broaden your pedagogical repertoire, especially as it relates to reading comprehension, visit some of your elementary school or primary school colleagues' classrooms, whether they're teaching English or, home language, and look to see what strategies are they using to engage students in text, young readers in text, and how we might apply those to older readers. Because it's certainly true that as we get older, as our students get older, we're not so much, we assume they already have a lot of strategies to make meaning with a text. Um, and so we focus on the story itself and less about comprehension strategy. All right, well, if there aren't any more questions, that's basically what I wanted to share with you all today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. It was really great. Like, I think just, the techniques that you shared today, they are really great. And I'm sure like the teachers will start using them. Yeah, and if there are any, like, Zuro, please let us know if there are any questions on Facebook, because our viewers also just, watch us on Facebook. This will be, yeah, great. Yeah, and yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, everybody liked today webinar.
Thanks. Thank
Yeah, likes
you.
today webinar. This is really great. Thank you so much.
All right,
Yeah,
happy Ramadan to you and your families, and
thank you so much.
enjoy the
Thank you so
month.
much. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe just last question to
Yes.
you, Professor Salas, like, again, looking around the world and looking around the world, yeah, and kind of, seeing diverse students.
Mhm.
So I can see that again, teaching reading is probably one of the really great, strategies that teachers can do. And yeah, based on your experience of teaching foreign students, yeah,
Yeah.
what would be your recommendation? How to motivate students to read more and to be like goats, as you mentioned today?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's trying to create moments where they can be successful in a class where they're reading something. So I think it goes back to that. How do students identify as readers? Some people will say, "I'm a bad reader," right? "I'm not a good reader," or "I don't like reading," or "I like reading." And so maybe to create moments where they can be successful and where they can engage in a text in a way that's really successful. And I think that's why something like the text to self connection making, the student can be very successful with this, even if they have a limited, even if they don't, shine as readers. And the same with text to text and the same with text to world. So creating those moments of success, and I think that's motivates students because what we do know too is the the more you read, the better you get at reading, right? So a lot of and nobody's born as a great reader. It's something that we develop, but a lot of teachers like us, we don't really remember anything other than we were good at reading, which is probably why we became teachers, right? Or we liked books, right? But not everybody has that experience. So to create moments for them to be successful. And I think that that will plant the seed for motivation. I think so.
Yeah, that's for sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm really concerned about like, reading skills because so far extensive reading nowadays is a luxury because like, people live in a very hectic world where everything needs to be done and so many
Oh,
meetings and like everything around. So, and to some extent, what do you think about like, some AIs, yeah,
yeah,
that can help like, students nowadays to I can say that students cannot read all the reading materials, yeah,
yeah,
in their
yeah.
university, and they're using AI to find out, like, the key ideas from the book and just, kind
Yeah.
of, what do you think about this,
I don't use a lot of AI, but I think that if AI can give students a certain level of comfort that, okay, I understand the story and establish a baseline for understanding. But I think this is why these older strategies like connection making, in some ways, it's sort of AI proof, right? It's because you're asking the student to make a personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no need for AI, right? And I think that even in the assessments that I do at the university level with teachers and that sort of thing, um, I've found one way to avoid sort of this AI controversy is to personalize the assignments so that there's not a uniformity of response, that it allows for many different responses and formats. So, okay, one participant here said, even before AI, some students only read short summaries of the books. Well, different people have different need different supports. For example, it's always been easier for me to watch the movie before I read the book.
Yeah.
When I was a student, if I
Uh-huh.
could watch the movie and then go back and read the book, it was much easier for me to understand and to visualize,
Mm.
especially with something like Shakespeare.
Yeah.
If I could watch the play, like a BBC version of Romeo and Juliet, and then go back and read the book, then it made a lot of sense, you know.
Mm.
So sometimes that I'm not against someone reading a plot summary. And in some cases, I've watched movies and I didn't understand what happened at the end of the movie. I had to go and look for a plot summary and then go back and watch the movie again. So it's like, yeah, I'm thinking of like uh, the final Harry Potter film. I really didn't understand it. I had to go back and read the summary. So I think that I'm not against um, students using other supports, additional supports. Mhm. But I think that I guess the assessment changes too. In instead of what does the text mean, which is a more traditional assessment, what does the text mean to you? This changes the assessment. And then this puts less pressure on the student to produce a correct answer. You see what I
Mm.
mean? Those are
Yeah.
great questions, though. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, Professor Salas, like it was, yeah, such a pleasure. And I enjoyed every minute of today's webinar. Yeah, to be honest.
Me
Thank you
too.
so
Well,
much.
it's wonderful to be back with English Without Borders, and thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, yeah. It just, it's always great to, yeah, to host,
My pleasure.
yeah, to host you, and we'll be happy to see you in person in Tajikistan someday.
Me
And let's
too.
hope for that. Let's hope for that. Yeah, thank you so much. And once again, thank you so much for all of you, dear audience. Like, yeah, hope you enjoyed, yeah, today's webinar. And yeah, Professor, we'll be happy to see you over and over. Just let us know when you are available and we'll be happy to reconnect with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right. Goodbye then.
Yeah, have a great evening. And for you, dear Professor, have a great day ahead. Thank you so much, dear
Thanks so
all.
much. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye.